Hello, beautiful homemakers. Well, I got the first questionnaire back from the women that have been married more than 50 years, and fittingly, it was from my own mother. She was 18 when she got married, and one of the questions is, do you think you got married too young? And she said no. After all, if she had waited, then she would not have been married for 50 years because my dad died in 2016. They were married for 51 years, 1 month, and 1 day. What is the most important trait or thing about your spouse? She wrote, he was a Christian. And the most important thing about her is she was a Christian. It's funny because the other day I was in Solvang, and in a shop a man randomly asked me the secret of being married for 20 years. And I said, marry a Christian. And he was so taken aback that he actually stepped back and he paused, and then he said, you know what? I think you may be right. Most people admit to thinking they have married the wrong person fairly early in their marriage. Did you experience this feeling with your spouse? And she said once or twice, but just because I didn't get my way on something. Did you ever want to leave your husband? If yes, what stopped you? No, she never wanted to leave him. What is the best piece of advice you would give to yourself if you started back at the beginning? Realize that everyone makes bad judgments from time to time. And she was saying not just him, but herself and everyone around her as well, and to be forgiving. What is something you'd like to bluntly say to women if you knew that they would listen? Pay attention to and look for all his good qualities and let him know. A very FW response, even though she's never read that book. What are some ways that you and or your husband avoided addictions of bad habits? She said they would talk things over as to whether they were good or bad for them as a couple, and more importantly, was it pleasing to God? For instance, drinking alcohol and keeping it in the house. They decided they weren't going to do that. I did not see my parents drink any alcohol until I was probably in my 30s. And even then, it was such a rare occasion. If you were given another chance to marry, would you choose your husband again? Yes, she would. When you first met, did you know that he was the one? She said yes. She was pretty sure when she met him that he could be the one. If not, how long did love take to blossom between you? And she said their love grew stronger each passing year. Did you live traditional roles within the family? Yes, very traditional. When my dad turned 56, he retired, and shortly before that, my mom went to work while we were at school because he was in ill health. But she was always home when we got home. She always took summers off her job. That was always a condition of employment. And she only worked for a few years when my dad got better. He didn't go back to work. He was retired, but she wanted to be home. Can you share with us your experience of keeping love, romance, and happiness alive, especially in hard times? She said, we made sure to do things together that we enjoyed. They had a date night about once a month, and they would often go to the theater, live theater plays, and they enjoyed traveling, not extensively, pretty local. Traveled more before kids came along, and they always made a point of celebrating their anniversary and going out for that. Remember, this also was a time before everybody went out to eat constantly. This was when almost all meals were eaten at home, except we often would go out on Sunday afternoons after church to eat. Do you have any advice about deepening marital bonds by learning how to talk and listen? She said, it is so important to try to listen without a rebuttal before he finishes. Try to see a situation from his point of view and don't interrupt with, if he says it was on a Saturday, don't interrupt and say, oh no, it was on a Sunday. Ignore the little things that just don't matter, or you may find that he'll just stop talking and sharing when you are around. Did you accept him as he is? Pretty much. I did try to improve certain habits, but I didn't make it a demand or a game changer. Did you appreciate him? For the most part. However, since his death, I wish I had told him I appreciated him more. And I wish I had told him I loved him more. And I'm sure they did that a lot, but everyone has guilt when a loved one dies. In fact, I think one of the sweetest things my dad did before he died was he told my mom to not have any regrets and to not beat herself up for anything she failed to do. He told her that she was a very good wife. And when she would say, I wish I had done this, I wish I had done that. I said, Mom, remember what Dad said. Don't beat yourself up. You were a good wife. There was a question, what are some things you wish you would have spent less time on? And she couldn't think of an answer for that. How did you handle differing opinions on potentially fiery topics such as politics, religion, money, or how to raise the children? She said we agreed on all those things. It helped that we were Christians. It's very easy when you're a Christian to take it to God's Word and compare. Ask yourself, how would the Lord have us live? And that's what they did. What do you wish you had or hadn't done? Please, just one general piece of advice. I wish I had spent time with him at dialysis. I think he was on dialysis for 4 years. In looking back, I think it was harder on him than I thought at the time because my dad never complained. In fact, when we would pick him up from dialysis, she mainly picked him up, but once a week I would pick him up and I'd say, how you doing, Dad? And he'd say, lousy. But there's nothing I can do about that, so I'm not going to complain. And he'd put a smile on his face and be cheerful. She said, I think he needed me to be around more when he wasn't feeling well. But men don't complain, do they? He took to heart that verse that admonishes us to be neither grumblers nor complainers. What things have you and your spouse had in common from the beginning of your marriage until now that you continue to enjoy together today? And she said, going to church and being involved there. And they were very involved. When we were growing up, we went every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. And I think my mom even would attend ladies' Bible class while we were at school. She often taught the children's classes. My dad was a deacon. And then I can remember spending some Saturdays at the church where my dad would be mowing the lawn. My mom would be getting communion ready. And sometimes we'd be dusting, doing general cleanup around the church building. Don't think that we hated that. We loved it. It was a beautiful building, and we would bring our friends, and we'd go into the auditorium, and we would play church. And there were lots of parties and gatherings of the church at different people's homes. They also had built an amazing classroom for kids. It had like 28 or 30 learning stations, and every week you would rotate a different learning station. It was hands-on. It was just so neat. I've never seen anything like that before. The church got together and did that. And then every once in a while, there would be a fifth Sunday sing where people from our non-denominational church would gather at different churches to have an afternoon of singing. And there was also potlucks at the park or at the building. As we grew up, we would get involved in VBS. When I was 13, we moved to a different church because the church we had been going to was becoming a Spanish-speaking church, but still a Church of Christ congregation. And then as we were older, one of the jobs my mom had was church secretary. Again, that was only while we were in school, and my dad was a deacon. He was on the finance ministry, I remember. Over the years, how have they been able to resolve conflict without holding resentment? She said, we didn't hold grudges. They would let things lie for about a week, and then they would go for a drive and discuss it. How do you still deeply love one another and keep the peace even when you don't agree on something? We decided to be civil even when we didn't agree. We each still did our jobs around the house. However, we didn't talk much until we had time to sift through our feelings. We would give it a week and then we would talk it through. And she mentioned to me they'd often go for a drive. If they are happily married, I would like to know how they maintained it over the decades. Never let a disagreement fester for too long. One of you has to break the ice and insist on coming up with a way to mend fences. She said they were both good about doing that. What was the most important sacrifice they made to keep their marriage happy? She said not to share problems with other family members who they thought might see things from their perspective and try to get them on their side. She said she learned early on that she shouldn't do that. She said, learn to work things out only with your spouse. And of course, disclaimer, we are not talking about people that are being physically abused. What trait in your partner do you believe has especially contributed to the longevity of your marriage? For example, patience, quick to forgive, etc. And she wrote, his patience. Our determination to never consider divorce as a solution to any problem. However, I'm not sure either of us would have survived an infidelity on the part of the other. We kept ourselves from getting too close to friends or others who might have been attractive in some way. And when I was going over this with my mom, we talked about how adultery starts in the mind. And the way you keep from adultery happening is you start counting your blessings about your spouse. You stay away from the person that is attractive to you. And if you have to be around that person for some reason, then you ask the Lord to help you. And believe me, He will. What action or initiative transformed your marriage for the better in difficult times? For example, praying together each morning, saying I love you more often, etc. She said, what transformed their marriage? Studying the Bible together. And she also felt that going to church together was very important. And the easiest way to get through difficult times is to bring it to the Lord together. What is your best advice for raising faithful kids? Give them good examples in yourself. Did you ever read or follow advice from any Fascinating Womanhood or Fascinating Girl or Total Woman books? No. However, I have participated in women's studies at our church on Christian womanhood and homemaking. Did you consider the Titus 2 women advice to be helpful in your marriage? Yes, especially when older women from our church gave advice or taught our women's groups. It's such a good thing to do if you have early godly women in your church who do follow Titus 2, verses 3 through 5. Did the Proverbs 31 woman give you inspiration? Yes. Do you have a favorite Bible verse about marriage? And she put Proverbs 31, verses 11 through 12. The New King James Version reads, "The heart of her husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life." Did you faithfully attend church with your husband? Do you think that is important to do? Yes and yes. Is there anything else you want to tell us? The years fly by so quickly. Don't think that later on you will take time to do things together or make him a priority. We aren't promised even tomorrow. Show him how much you love and appreciate him now. And at the bottom of each questionnaire, I put 2 things that 2 people said. I am looking so forward to your interview with these couples that have been married over 50 years. We can glean so much information from them. And another person wrote, I also look to couples like these for guidance. They have so much wisdom to share. So hopefully I will be getting in more questionnaires. A couple of people have said no, and several of the people I wanted to interview aren't quite at 50 years. They're like at 48. And I wanted to interview my aunt, but she's in her 90s, and I'm not sure I'll be able to do that. And of course, the majority of couples that I have known have all graduated to heaven, but I'm hoping I'll be able to complete the questionnaires of several other women in our church. I thought I'd end by what I shared at my parents' 50th wedding anniversary party. I am so thankful for my parents. Many people have asked, do you really know how lucky you are to have had them for your parents? And believe me, I do know. For one thing, we all actually liked it when my dad came home. Some friends would think they would have to leave or even hide, but I knew that if we had made a fort that day out of chairs and blankets, my dad would go through it. If we played with cars and made block towns, it would stay up for Dad to admire. We were excited when he came home. We also loved rainy days at our house, not just because of the rain, but because we knew that when we got home from school, fresh hot chocolate chip cookies would be coming out of the oven. We would run home. Even my dad didn't mind the traffic as much, knowing that there would be these cookies. One summer, my parents brought the beach to us in our backyard. We went and bought sand, poured it on our patio, bought a plastic pool with a slide, and put the sprinklers over the clothesline for sea spray. We had our picnic table and towels, and the whole neighborhood played in our backyard that summer. We also had a birthday party for our dog, and whenever we get together with childhood friends, they always mention it. I loved being at home, and that is why I wanted to be home with our son. I am also very grateful that my parents didn't force feed us. Yes, we had to eat our veggies and try new foods, but thankfully, my pediatrician, who had 8 kids, said, "Who cares?" when my mother said I wouldn't drink milk. A few years later, when we went back to the doctor because I would only eat peanut butter sandwiches, he said, "Great! Making lunch every day for her will be a snap. Make peanut butter sandwiches until she asks for something different." But I never did. I have eaten a peanut butter sandwich with no jelly every day for over 40 years. Thank you for letting me eat my favorite foods and not forcing me to drink milk. Usually, of course, we were home with my mom, but one day I was homesick from 1st grade and my dad stayed home with me. My brother and mother had a field trip to go on to the fire station, and boy was I jealous when they got their picture in the paper. Before leaving, my mom told my dad to feed me a peanut butter sandwich for lunch. But around 11:30, my dad came into my room and said, "Do you feel well enough to go to McDonald's?" Did I? What a treat! I was instantly better. I clearly remember that day, and that we then took a drive to the top of Spyglass Hills to look at the view. The only time we ever did that. A few years ago I got a call from an elementary school friend. She called to tell me that it was my mother's example that made her want to stay home with her children. I hadn't even remembered her ever coming over after school, but she remembered. She said she didn't have any good examples around her of what to do, so she just did what she remembered my mom doing. Everyone here probably knows that we are a homeschooling family, and the number one question I'm asked by moms considering homeschooling is, how do you have the confidence to homeschool even through high school? I just have to look back at how involved my parents were at home with my brother and me. The school said, "Read, dear kids." My parents read to us and took the time to listen to us read. The school said, "Here are your weekly spelling words." My mother listened to us recite them while she made dinner. The school said, "Do a report." It was my mom who showed us how and made us correct our errors. The school said, 2 plus 2 equals 4, and 2 times 2 equals 4. I went home and said, "But why are they both 4? How could that be?" And my mother showed me the grid of bathroom wall tiles and explained how multiplication is just fast adding. She was an excellent homeschooling mom. She was also our main Bible teacher at church, and I feel we received an excellent biblical history and worldview education from her and my dad, because both of my parents were the best kind of sermon. They lived out their Christianity. They didn't just drop us off at church to be taught there. We were taught by example. They always gave people the benefit of the doubt. They assumed the best of people. They treated people kindly and gently. When it was realized that too much money was given in change, we had to go back to the shop to return it. They never got angry at us for being immature children or for spilling our drinks at dinner. They would both jump up, and while one cleared the dish, the other mopped up the table and the floor. They didn't yell, complain, or blame. They were quick to offer reassurances and say, "Accidents happen." I had several friends comment how differently my parents reacted than theirs. We were shown love and affection and believed we were actually a delight to be around. Several in this room have already celebrated their 50th anniversary, and I know many more will in the days to come. And I believe the difference is that we have Christ at the center of our lives. May God bless you, ladies, as you put Christ at the center of your marriage or in your search for a spouse. Bye.